Welcome to This Week in Health IT Influence, where we discuss the influence of technology on health with the people who are making it happen. Today, second part of a two-part series where I talk to Schade and David Muntz, principals with StarBridge Advisors. They are fantastic guests, and we have had, if you listened to last week, and I highly recommend you go back and listen to it if you haven't, what we did is we played a little Health IT Jeopardy. I gave them 10 topics. We broke them down. We go back and forth on major topics that are impacting health IT. And it's a fantastic conversation. So part one was last week. This week, part two. My name is Bill Russell, healthcare CIO, coach, and creator of This Week in Health IT, a set of podcast videos and collaboration events dedicated to developing the next generation of health leaders. This episode is sponsored by Health Lyrics. I coach health leaders on all things health IT. Coaching was instrumental in my success, and it is the focus of my work at Health Lyrics. I've coached CEOs of health systems, startups, CIOs, and CTOs as well. If you want to elevate your game in 2020, visit healthlyrics.com to schedule your free consultation. As I said last week, I recorded this in late 2019 prior to our studio move. My sound's not that great, but Sue and David sound great, and you're not going to have a problem hearing them, and really not a problem hearing me as well. Again, we played a little Health IT Jeopardy. I think it's a fantastic episode. I hope you enjoy. Plays out. Sue, back to you. IT operations, security. Let's see. Those three taken: mentoring, training, staffing, innovation, or experience.
Training.
I'm
not sure what experience is a pretty broad word, but
it is.
We all have some. Let's go with training. Training for 100, whatever.
All right. Mentoring and training. So where are we at today in terms of developing the right skills for the next generation and developing that next generation of people? That because we all have a little bit of gray hair. Actually, we'll go to Chime next month and we'll see a lot of gray hair, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So what are we doing to mentor and train that next generation?
Okay. And yes, we all have gray hair. Unfortunately, I'm not going to Chime because of our go live. And let me just say, this group, all committed to developing the next generation. And kudos, Bill, for what you're doing with these podcasts and just your focus in your new services that even get at that more. So that's good. What are we doing? Let me start with the negative first. It's disappointing to see that training budgets are still the first to cut. When you go back to the budget conversation, you have to make some cuts. And in the grand scheme of things, if you think about it, your training budget is probably small. It's a small percentage of your IT budget when you look at everything else you're paying for. Yet it's an easy cut. So that's unfortunate. And I would hope that CIOs would find a way to hang on to that and be creative about how they can use that money. I think that, does this answer your question directly? I'm not sure. One of the things I'm excited about and why I love doing interims and being back in an organization, interacting with people and teams every day and helping solve problems and being part of it, is I see all these up and coming leaders. I see young people who are eager to learn from others and grow into their roles and into future roles and be promoted. I love hearing about the people who senior leaders have identified as, the next, and how are we going to convince them that they're right for management, and we can support them and move them into that kind of role. So that's encouraging. I think more and more, our generation leaders recognizing that we will not be here forever and we've got to be developing those folks. So that's positive, and just, seeing that commitment. I'll stop there in terms of where it's at today. Let David comment.
Yeah, David, do you want me to?
Yeah, I love what you said. And by the way, Sue is one of the best mentors I know and spends a lot of time doing that. So she's obviously giving back for so many reasons. And I think it's because we all benefited from mentors, whether they were, you want to go ahead and say something, Sue?
Oh, wait.
Okay. Well, we benefited from mentors, and that is by being taught directly or by observation. And a lot of the lessons I learned was from just watching great leaders, not necessarily one-on-ones, but to the degree that you can get to do one-on-ones, it's fabulous. But I think one of the issues is whether or not we should be we should look at where we are and where we're going. And this issue of IT being a commodity or not really impacts what it is that you're trying to train for. Are you trying to train for a skill, which might be more technically oriented, or are you trying to train for leadership, which helps you take advantage of the technical resources that you have? And by the way, we need both, and so you can't ignore either if you want to be successful. And I think it's really critical to try to give people a chance to do things. One of the things that I've seen is, and this is especially difficult for leaders, and I always, and I'll just share some of my arrogance here, but I always figured if I could do something, I could do it better. And so that's part of my reason for being a leader, is a certain amount of righteous indignation with the status quo. On the other hand, if I wanted to be successful as a leader, I had to give up my belief that I was the only one who could perform the function. And when I learned to delegate, and I mean really delegate, and accept that things weren't going to be exactly like I wanted them, then I found that oftentimes they were better or different. And so I think it's both mentoring and then letting people do things on their own. And so that delegation is probably one of the greatest ways to train people. And you can do that as a leader, and that allows you to be a mentor because there will be lessons that everybody learns from that delegated responsibility.
So if I can come back, one point I want to make is we're all continuous learners, right? We may have gray hairs. There's so much we don't know. There's so much we still need to learn. The number of times in a given day that I may say, okay, educate me about that. Help me understand that enough so that we can work that through together. The other thing is that it is maybe connected to that. It is very two-way. I mean, the things that we learn from others and that we learn from this next generation that's coming up, and they're bringing some different approaches and styles to how they work, and it's very refreshing to be around them and learning from them. So I'm not talking that specific training and dollars and go to this class and this course, which is all comes into play, but just that continual learning environment, everybody in the mix, learning from one another.
And Sue, can I just jump on that? Because I love what you said. I just had lunch today and this came up. And I was saying I am so grateful to the millennials because they do a much better job of teaching me about life-work balance. And that's one of the things. It's not a question of is their work ethic wrong. It's that my view on life-work balance is much different than theirs. And so, still learning a lot from the people I observe. So, and the much younger people, which is refreshing.
Yeah, two things on the younger generation. One is I was just talking to somebody who received a sabbatical after working for a company for 15 years. So this is not a millennial. And they said, well, I'm only going to be able to take 2 weeks of the 4-week sabbatical. And I thought, a millennial would never do that. That would not even be
No.
But our generation would. It's like, oh, well, we're needed. We've got to, we've got this implementation or we've got this thing going. For whatever reason, that's, and the millennial, the different age groups and whatever, they do act differently. They were raised by different people. They do act differently. The other thing is we at the conference, I forget his last name, but Justin was an 18-year-old high school kid who stood in front of like 4,000 or 5,000 people at the Health Catalyst conference. And I was just amazed by that. I was in front of my high school class. I was nervous to stand in front of a small classroom. He was standing in front of 5,000 people talking about machine learning and AI and what he's been able to do with the data and making that available. And I thought, in this area of mentoring and training, there's this identification of special skills and identification of talents that I think is one of the roles of the CIO. I think sometimes people get pigeonholed in our organizations, and it's our job to see more of what they can bring to the organization and to somehow release them from maybe what they're doing and give them opportunities to grow and to prosper. Sue, you started, so I'll give you the last word on this.
Oh, and this is like the next. I'm not sure I'm doing great with your format. The last word on this, we're all continual learners. We've got to invest in our people. They are our greatest asset. And continue that commitment to the next generation of leaders that we all have.
All right. David, operations security, staffing, innovation, or experience?
I guess security is probably the topic.
It's IT operations and security. Go ahead.
Oh, and security. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've said one of the things is that you need to convert from you need to convert to a utility, and associated with that is security, and you've got to do a better job. And one of the things that I hear is all the time about people trying to balance all the old equipment with budget. You can't afford to. You can't be secure if you can't buy the newer version of the clinical device because it's running on the old Windows platforms. But it still is the human element that is the most dangerous. And no matter what we do, the bad actors outside the institution are not nearly as dangerous as the people that we're looking at inside. And so the breaches that I've seen or I've been involved in really happened because our own employees didn't do what we expected. And so when I was in the government, I heard from one of the ladies who was the chief privacy officer said that, and this has stuck with me, that you have to create a culture of privacy and security. And if you don't, you won't be successful. And everybody has to own that responsibility. And so we have to do a much better job of doing what would be considered normal. It's not just the training, it's the background checks, it's motivating people, recognizing people, being good leaders, good custodians, good servant leaders, where you're looking out so that people don't want to do harm to the organization, and empowering everybody. And that is every single individual to be an agent of security. And so that's the kind of oversimplified but extraordinarily difficult measure to reach.
Yeah, 25 million medical records have gone missing to the first half of this year, and that's really not okay. And as you state, I mean, it's a lot. It's due to us. It's due to it's mistakes. It's misconfigurations. It's it could even be people that are I don't know. It's mistakes. Majority of these are just flat out mistakes being made by health IT. It's not nefarious actors who are hacking in and doing these sophisticated attacks for the most part, at least that we know of. When you look at the top 10 issues, even the Equifax one, you just go, well, it's an unpatched server. It's, that's basic hygiene in terms of where we're at and where we're going. Sue, IT operations and security, where do you think we're at?
Where are we at?
Is the sigh your answer?
No, the sigh is okay. Say something smart. I was going to comment specifically about security and the importance of security culture. And I had that conversation just this week with people about, is there a security culture in this particular organization that there needs to be, and that has to start at the top. I think David did a good job talking about some of the key components of security. But if your top executives are not totally bought in and understand the risks, you're not going to get the support around policy. You're not going to get the support on budget and be able to do the kinds of things that you need to do. IT operations, what all are you covering? All of infrastructure.
Yeah. So let me frame this up. Are we seeing disaster recovery plans in place? Are we seeing ITIL processes being followed? Are we seeing patch management, or are we still sort of behind and saying, well, we're almost caught up to the patches we need to do? And I'm not talking about clinical devices at this point, because that's a whole nother can of worms. And in some cases, it doesn't report into health IT. In some cases, it does. I'm just talking about the basic infrastructure. Are we keeping up with the basic maintenance of that operation?
I think it's really variable. I think there's probably some very large organizations who are doing this very well, and there's a whole lot of organizations that need help, that haven't made the investments that they need to make, don't have the leadership, the strength of the leadership in that space that they need. So there's plenty of opportunity to raise that bar in many healthcare organizations, is my sense.
All right, so I'll take the last word on this, because when I came into the organization that I became CIO, we had 8 outages in our data center over 6 weeks, and that was a complete outage. The data center went down. And so that was just a result of, we had just insourced from Perot after 10 years. We hired a whole bunch of people, but we didn't set up all the processes around it and all the procedures around it. And the bottom line is, if I became a CIO for a new organization tomorrow, I would reset their expectations for all the really cool stuff we're going to do. And I would say the first year is getting the operation right, getting the people in the right roles, getting them trained, getting the procedures done, because everything else is done on top of that. And even though you don't see it in a lot of organizations, if it's done right, you shouldn't see it, and you shouldn't even think about it. But that foundation has to be. And I'll tell you, when you do mergers and acquisitions, you almost start over. You almost say, all right, we're bringing these two together. Let's make sure that the two organizations know how to talk. They know how to handle disaster recovery. They know how to handle basic operations. All right.
You wanted the last word. Can I say one other thing about this?
Sure.
You both know that the interim I'm doing right now is as Chief Technology Officer, and I tell people who know me well, don't laugh, because I did not come up on the technical side of IT. Both of you are far more technical than I am. I came up on the application side. I started as a programmer a gazillion years ago. And I was hired in because they just needed to keep everything moving along in support of this big epic go live from the infrastructure side. They knew I wasn't the techie, the technical wizard. I have to say that the deeper I get in it, and the more I'm working with my folks in these projects, the more appreciation I have for the complexity of what our technical staff does and the environments that they support. It's incredible. And I know you guys know that, but I feel like I've gotten a whole different view of it doing this work right now, and I'm impressed.
Fantastic. I forgot who's next. David, are you next?
I'm happy to go next. I think so.
Right. So we have 3 topics left: staffing, innovation, and more importantly, we have 15 minutes left. Staffing, innovation, and experience. Which one of those would you like to talk about?
I think innovation is probably the topic that gets so much focus right now. And again, just my plea to people who are involved in it is to stay very practical and pragmatic. Again, I say, are you really involved in innovation? And I used the word hobbyist earlier. The shiny new object is great, but where does it fit? How does it align with the strategies? And so I think one of the things that I look at and I'm just going to try to pull digital health back in here, but if you're going to be a digital health system, then what you've got to do is use innovation in a way that really pays homage to the name. And that is not to use real-world-based metaphors to create new ways to do things. And I will say that there's a difference. I think a lot of people talk about innovation. A lot of people talk about automation, but they use innovation as a way to describe it. Innovation to me is not doing something that you can do in the physical world with a metaphor. Like, we're not going to take a piece of paper-based material and then automate it. What we're going to do is we're going to figure out a completely new way to use technology that people have never seen before. And I'm going to use the simplest possible occurrence of that. I was on a bus ning down the street, so I didn't have to pay attention to driving. And I look out the window, and this is right after flip phones had been replaced or were being replaced by smartphones. And one of the most innovative ways I saw somebody using a telephone was a woman who was standing on the corner and she was holding her cell phone, which of course I used. It would do all the things a smartphone would do, but she had turned the camera on and was brushing her hair, and she had turned a cell phone into a compact. And I thought, oh my gosh, here's somebody who is using a device that wasn't intended to be used for that purpose whatsoever in a way that I would have never thought about. And I've always said that the real innovation comes not when you take people who are brilliant and well educated from in a formal way, but if you can get technology out to the end users, they will do things with your programs that you never could have thought about or expected. And they will figure out solutions to problems that you didn't know you had. And so I think part of innovation is creating something new. I think part of innovation is just pushing things forward so quickly that the users can then turn around and figure out a way to use them that we could not have done as IT professionals.
So, and Sue or David on this, because I really want to ask this question, which is, where do you point innovation at? We've heard Palamka talk about they route all their faxes through AWS now. It looks for consent forms, and then it does a fire because 60% of their faxes were consent forms. And instead of somebody reading all those and whatever, it now uses the machine learning and the technology. It finds the consent forms, and then it pushes a fire call back through the API back into the EHRSA consent form received. And that's a form of innovation. Daniel Barchi was on talking about robotic process automation and how they're using that around billing and how it's really revolutionized what they're doing there. So that's one area. I was at Health 2.0 and heard Aaron Martin and others talk about innovation around the consumer experience and those kind of things. But I've also had conversations where people are saying, look, it's looking very real like Walmart and CVS are absolutely planning to take away the front line of the hospital. And I talked to certain people who say that represents 20 to 30% of our business, which is only going to leave us with X. Should we be pointing our innovation at those kinds of risks to the health system's business model, or should we be pointing it at the business model as it exists today? And I'll throw it out to both of you because I don't think it's fair to point it at any one of you because I'm not sure I have a good answer for it yet.
Okay, I'll take that first, and I'll also say that I use my phone as a compact. That's a good idea. I've done that. It worked. I think when you started asking this question, Bill, I was thinking, where to focus innovation. I think, 3 buckets for sure. There's how do we help the clinicians? How do we do better patient care, more safe patient care? What does that mean? Automation, efficiencies, where can we apply new tools? There's still an incredible amount of inefficiencies within healthcare. We know that, and costs go with that. And then third bucket, the outward facing, what's called digital health, consumers, patient engagement, et cetera. I think you got to try to play in all of those. And depending on who's driving innovation for your organization, you may be focused just on clinicians, or you may be focused more on the outward facing consumer engagement. I think you got to look at all of them. Your point about the industry and risking our healthcare business models, I think, is how you asked it. We should not be trying to protect a certain model, right? We need to have a more holistic view of healthcare and the health and the ecosystem of health, and try to have some breakthroughs that go well beyond the models as we know them now, which is why, okay, I forgot, I'm sure you know, Bill, because you're up on everything, the company that was formed that Atul is now the president of, what did they name it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I forgot.
Okay, stump the host. You know what I'm talking about. They're looking at different models, right? we should not as healthcare providers, in my opinion, be threatened by the new models that are emerging out there, because in the long run, what do we want? We want better health. We want more cost effective. We want safer health for everybody. But, I won't go into politics. Bill, you're welcome.
David asked me a political question on one of the shows the last time we were on, so I'm not going to.
I know. You have the power of the edit.
Absolutely. Staffing experience. I think we touched on experience. So let's talk about staffing. One of the things I'm concerned about is just you talked about the IT utility. And I think when Halak was on the show, he talked about the fact that CIOs are going to be more procurers of technology as opposed to builders and those kind of things. Well, procurers of technology and sitting in front of cloud-based service consoles and spinning things up and down is different skills than potentially what we have within health IT today. What can we do? What can we do within our health IT organizations to prepare people for what's coming next? And is that our responsibility as CIOs of the organization? And if it is our responsibility, what are we going to do? David, I'll start with you.
Well, by the way, I do think that training is actually a reward for the people in IT. It's an incredible motivator. And so professional development seems to be a way to attract and retain people. So couldn't agree more that doing that is important. And it's important for selfish reasons, the ones I mentioned. If you want to keep people, what I used to tell people that worked for me, and I found it very effective, and by the way, I meant it, is that every year that you stay at this organization, I will find a way to make sure that you get some kind of professional development. And next year, your resume will be so good that you wouldn't leave, because the year after that it'll be that much better. And the idea is I want to make you prepared for the next job, but I want that next job to be inside my organization. And so it's not enough to change just the staff. You have to change the environment in which you're working. And that's where you need to be looking for innovations and how you can use technologies that people haven't thought about. And you have to move people's skills along. And it is true that there are a few people, a few percentage points of people who just don't want to change. They want to keep doing the same things with the same skills that they want. But in general, I find that the vast, overwhelming majority of people want to be trained. They want to be challenged. They want you to ask them to get smarter next year than they are this year. So I think having those kind of people around you makes you better. And, the idea is the smarter they get, the smarter you need to be. And so as a CIO, I've always felt pushed because they would always bring topics that I wasn't familiar with to me. And I felt like that, that old joke, you don't need to outrun the bear, you just need to outrun your friend or your companion in this case. And so the idea is I find that I probably get about 100 emails from listservs every day. And people go, that's ridiculous. And it's like, well, it may be ridiculous, but it helps me look for trends. It also helps me look for what's new that I wouldn't have anticipated had the staff not brought it to me. And so I think those are kind of interesting things to pay attention to.
So one of the things that I would say about staffing is there's a huge difference in the staffing challenges and probably strategies in markets that we've all been in, right? I was in the Boston market for many years. You Bill, were in the, LA, Southern California market. David, Dallas market. You've been working with a client in the New York market. Very, very, very different in terms of competition, being able to draw people. When an Epic implementation is done at one major system in the area, that you can get some of them onto yours if you're not that far, and they don't have to move houses and change kids' schools. They're ready for the next one, right? But how many healthcare organizations and IT shops are not in those big markets, who are just in the very same need for talent, and how do they find that talent, and how do they retain that talent, and how do they grow that talent? I'm in a market like that right now. It's beautiful. I love seeing the mountains every day in Burlington, Vermont, but it's a little far away and a little bit harder to recruit for. So those are really different staffing challenges that you have to look at. But when it comes down to it, the culture of your organization, your commitment to your people, your investing both time and money in training them and preparing them for the future, some of that is the same, but you have to recognize that you've got some different challenges.
Absolutely.
Great point.
Great conversation. I want to thank the two of you for coming on the show and trying out this new format. It's greatly appreciated, and I'm just a ton of wisdom. I can't wait to share it with everybody. And hopefully, I will see you guys soon. We're not going to see you at Chime, David. Are we going to see you at Chime?
Oh yes, you will.
I got to be careful talking about time-specific things on the podcast because you never know when it's going to air. So,
timeless. Thanks for having us. I always enjoy talking with you, Bill, and of course, working with David on anything.
Absolutely.
And I share exactly the same sentiments about the two of you. So, thank you all.
Thank you. Again, I want to thank David and Sue for taking the time to join me in the conversation. Again, so knowledgeable, so articulate. Really appreciate their support and their support of the show. When we recorded this, they were not channel sponsors for the podcast, and now StarBridge Advisors has become a channel sponsor for the show, and I really appreciate that. So special thanks to all of our channel sponsors who make this content possible: StarBridge Advisors, VMware, Galen Healthcare, Pro Talent Advisors, and Health Lyrics for choosing to invest in developing the next generation of health leaders. Please come back every Friday for more great interviews with influencers. And don't forget, every Tuesday, we take a look at the news, which is impacting health IT. This show is a production of This Week in Health IT. For more great content, check out the website or the YouTube channel. If you find this show valuable, please share it with peers. Shoot them an email, let them know that you're getting value out of it, and that is greatly appreciated. Thanks for listening. That's all for now.